My name is Royina,
Once
and
more.
I'm a PhD scholar from LGB Regional Institute of Mental Health. And my topic today is domains of family assessment. So before starting with the domains, let me quickly talk about why family assessment is important. Family therapy operates on the principle or belief that relationships within a family are as important in the behavior and experiences of people as the internal processes within individuals or broader social forces. The general systems theory is one theory which beautifully explains the importance of this family assessment. So, one central tenet of this theory is that the whole is more than the sum of its parts. So, to put it simply, to understand any individual, we must grasp their relation to the whole unit, that is, the family of which it is a part. The general systems theory also places emphasis on circular paths of causality. Rather than focusing on linear pathways of actions followed by reaction, this theory focuses on recursive patterns of mutual interaction and influence. So, circular causality says that there is a constant back and forth exchange of action and reaction, and then again, action. So, one example that would help in understanding this is that of the alcoholic husband and nagging wife, which is a common example which has been mentioned in some family therapy textbooks. So, in this, the basic problem is that the husband, who is an alcoholic, says that his substance abuse, that is, his alcoholism, is being maintained because of the wife's nagging behavior. And the wife, in turn, says that she nags her husband only because he drinks. So, as you can see, both their behaviors are maintaining each other's behaviors. So, both their behaviors would need to undergo simultaneous change in order to break this dysfunctional or pathological cycle of of this negative behaviors which are affecting their relationship adversely. Before I start, I'll quickly take you through the order of my presentation. I'll be starting with the family structure, and after that I'll be talking about leadership patterns, how we assess leadership patterns in family therapy. Then I'll be talking about role structure and functioning. After role structure and functioning, we'll move on to communication, which is a very important aspect of family assessment, followed by reinforcement. Then I'll be talking about cohesiveness. And finally, we'll be talking about adaptive patterns. So as you can see, this is the genogram. And in this, the current family is highlighted. That is, the family who has come for therapy or the family in which the problem is there is highlighted in red boundaries. So you have to mention the ages. Along with the ages, as you can see, there are some symbols over here, like two symbols show divorce, one shows separation. Then there is crosses which show that somebody has passed away in the family. And along with that, we also have other symbols, which I'll be showing in the next slide. So when we do a genogram session in family therapy, it particularly takes one whole session. Unlike in psychiatric history taking, this is not a very brief exercise, but we look in detail at the relationships or interactional patterns between people. So as you can see, some of these symbols, for example, two lines denote a close relationship. And the zigzag line denotes that there is hostility between two family members. And three lines indicates that there is over-involvement, which is called a fused relationship between two family members. And when there is hostility as well as a close relationship, it leads to a close hostile relationship, which is shown by two lines and then a zigzag line. And then there is cutoff, which is shown with this symbol. And if there is any kind of abuse, physical or sexual, we show it with this particular symbol. Then there is also drug or alcohol abuse, suspected abuse, in recovery from abuse. So these are the symbols used. And like I said, that marriage is shown in this manner, where you can also write the year, and living together can be shown like this. And then if you look at children, if there is stillbirth, miscarriage, abortion, for each of these, you have symbols. If you talk about identical twins or fraternal twins, pregnancy, all of this can be shown using various symbols. All these life events and interactional patterns are very important in family assessment. So we use these symbols to explain pictorially, and these symbols which explain relationships are also used in what is known as structural mapping to understand the relationships that exist between the family members. So then we come to boundaries. In boundaries, there are three types of boundaries. The first being closed and rigid, second is clear and open, and third is diffuse or enmeshed boundary. When we talk about boundaries, we assess both the internal boundaries and external boundaries in a family. The internal boundaries basically refer to the boundaries between the family members, and the external boundaries refer to the boundaries that exist between a family and the larger society. So a closed and rigid boundary would mean if there is an external boundary which is closed and rigid, it would mean that the family has very little or no interaction with the rest of the society or extended family and friends. If the internal boundary is closed and rigid, it would mean that there is very little to no interaction between the family members, and they don't share much with each other, and they tend to keep to themselves. Then next we come to clear and open boundaries. So if there are clear and open external boundaries, it would mean that there is a healthy degree of exchange of information outside the family. So the family members share healthy relationships and interactions with extended relatives, neighbors, etc. And clear and open internal boundaries would mean that there is a healthy degree of sharing of information, as well as a healthy degree of space and independence between the family members. The third is diffuse or enmeshed boundaries. In this, we see that there is over-involvement of outside people in the family. If the external boundaries diffuse or enmeshed, there is too much interference in family decisions, and the family members have more interaction with people outside the family than people inside the family. Diffuse and enmeshed internal boundaries would mean that there is a lot of dependence between the family members, and they spend too much time with each other and have very little connections or interactions with people outside the family. So usually, if we come across a family that has closed and rigid external boundaries, it is likely that the internal boundaries would be diffuse and enmeshed. That is, they interact more with each other than interact with other people outside the family. And similarly, if the external boundaries are diffuse or enmeshed, it would usually mean that there is very little to no interaction, and that would mean that there is closed and rigid boundaries between the family members. So they seek those interactions and relationships outside of the family. And clear and open boundaries are the healthy kind of boundaries. So if it is closed and rigid or diffuse or enmeshed, we seek to make the boundaries healthy, that is clear and open. So like I said, we look at what kind of boundary is present within the family members. So out of these three, we see what kind of an interaction is present within the family members that helps us understand the nature of boundaries. And the external boundary helps us understand the boundaries of the family to the larger society, to the neighbors, relatives, other people within the society. After boundaries, we come to subsystems. So the family is a system. Within that system, there exist smaller groups, which we call as subsystems. So every family system has few prime subsystems, which are the marital or couple subsystem, the parent-child subsystem, and the sibling subsystem. However, it is not limited to just these three subsystems. There might be other subsystems as well. The relationships between these people in terms of subsystems are seen in terms of coalitions or alliances as well sometimes. And each subsystem has its own set of rules, boundaries, and unique characteristics. Next, I'll be talking about alignments. So alignments are basically of two types. The first type is coalition. So the term coalition is basically used usually in a negative sense. That is when a group of people are in opposition to one family or a group of family members. So usually if one person or a group of people is the target of this coalition, then we see that the other group is targeting this particular group and they are against each other. So they don't really have a good or positive supportive relationship with each other. These groups will be in opposition to one another. However, in contrast, when we say alliance, alliance means the joining together of two or more members to meet a common goal, and it is usually used in a positive sense. Although it is potentially neutral, an alliance also has the potential to turn aggressively directed. So an alliance can become a coalition later on. However, usually the term in itself means that it is used for a positive purpose. For example, if the children come together to make their father recover from alcohol abuse so that he becomes functional again, that can be one example of an alliance. After this, we'll be talking about triangulation. So triangulation occurs when an outside person intervenes or is drawn into a conflicted or stressful relationship in an attempt to ease tension and facilitate communication. So if there is a strained relationship in a particular subsystem, another third between two people, if there is a conflict or an issue, another third person is drawn in or brought in an attempt to ease tension in that particular group. Then we come to detouring. So the term detouring means that attention is refocused on a particular family member to avoid attending to a larger family concern. So when we talk about detouring, there are two types. One is detouring attacking. In detouring attacking, parents are seen as bonding together and scapegoating the child. So in this, what happens is the child is attacked as a way of redirecting the focus from the parents' conflict. So when the parents don't want to face the issue that is present between them, they blame the child for their problems. For example, if parents, if a set of parents say that, if a set of parents say or feel that after the child was born, they have been rarely spending time with each other, which is leading to conflict between them. This can be one example of detouring attacking, how they are blaming the child as the reason for the problem between them, which may not actually be the case. In detouring supportive, we see that parents mask their differences. So here parents mask, they try to hide their differences by focusing on the child and showing too much love, attention, and concern towards the child. So one very good example that I can give here is that of children with dissociation. So dissociation can happen when a child sees that his parents are continuously fighting, or they're not talking to each other, or there is violence in the family. So the dissociation will only stop when the parents are ready to sort out their differences, rather than attending to the sick child and saying that the child should be the focus of their attention, and not realizing that masking their differences is maintaining the problem. So in detouring supportive, outwardly it looks like the parents, you cannot sometimes make out that why this dissociation is happening, or you don't know what the secondary gain is. So the secondary gain in this case might be that the parents are now not fighting ever since the child has been having dissociative episodes, because their concern has brought them together. Their common concern or love for the child has brought them together. But the minute the child gets better, the parents start quarreling again. So that is maintaining the child's illness. So if the parents stop fighting even when the child gets better and is well, that is a way to ensure that these episodes reduce or they don't happen again. Then there is family developmental stages. I'll not be getting into the details of this as Dr. Shobna has in the previous lecture series already given a detailed description about these stages. The link is given below, and you all can access the link in the APSW page as well on YouTube. Next, I'll be talking about leadership patterns. So leadership patterns are basically divided into two parts. First, we talk about power structure. So who the leader is in a family can be on the basis of gender in some households. That is, male members are usually the ones to make decisions. Could be one example of gender-based authority or power. And sometimes it can also be specific to age. So the eldest member in the family, say, can hold more power, or somebody who has a very authoritative personality in the family is the one who holds power, and somebody who is soft-spoken may not hold power. So it is not always necessary that power will only lie with the male person in the family. If the male person is, say, somebody who is very soft-spoken and introverted, and the wife in the family is the one who is taking most of the decisions most of the time, and she is somebody who is very authoritative and outspoken, then the power might lie with the wife instead of the husband. In other cases, we see that it may not always be the eldest son who holds power. Sometimes it is the younger one. So we look at who holds power and how is that power with that particular person. What is the reason that this person is in power within the family? We also look at the acceptance of leadership within a family. So just because somebody is making decisions within a family or is the leader in the family doesn't mean that it is going to be accepted by all the family members. In some families, we see that the nominal head and the functional head are one and the same. So the nominal head is the one who is nominated by all the family members to be the head of the family, or nominated by most of the family members to be the head of the family. The functional head is the one who actually carries out all the tasks and makes all the decisions, and is the leader in the true sense because he or she is carrying out the functions. So sometimes we see that the someone who is fulfilling the functions and is also named the leader is the same person. Other times it is different. For example, if we see that in a particular family, the father is the nominal head of the family, but the mother is the functional head of the family. Because the father has fallen sick and is unable to work and fulfill the responsibilities, the wife has now become the functional head. So in this case, the nominal and functional head are not the same, and they are two different people right now. So this can also change over time. The power structure doesn't always change. There is sometimes imbalance in power, like when power is shifted from one generation to the other. When the father becomes old, the son takes over power. So there might be a power struggle in the sense that the father may be unwilling to hand over the power to the son. So these are some of the things that we talk about when we discuss power structure. Then coming to decision-making process, in terms of decision-making, it can be divided into autocratic or democratic decision-making. Autocratic decision-making is when only few selected people or only one person is making decisions in the entire family, and everyone in the family does not have a say in terms of decision-making or in making major decisions within the family. However, if the decision-making process is democratic, we see that everyone has a fair, fair share in terms of the responsibility of decision-making within a family, and everyone can share their opinions and views with regard to making any decision in the family. We also look at who are the participants in the decision-making process. So we might see that only the females are taking the decisions pertaining to the household, such as what will be cooked throughout the day, and other or in terms of shopping, making the shopping list, what are the things required? Those things are decided by the female members of the household, and the male members of the household take decisions relating to finances or buying property. So in this way, decision making can be divided also between genders, between people in terms of age, in terms of again power, authority, and younger people may not be involved in decision making. So if we look at the participants in the decision making process, it helps us in understanding whether the process is democratic or autocratic. In terms of implementation, we see how smooth the decision making process is within a family. For example, if there are too many different viewpoints and there is a clash, and it becomes difficult for the family to arrive at a decision and to understand which decision will be best. If it leads to conflict while making a decision and nobody is willing to compromise, it might lead to problems in decision making. Then next we come to role structure and functioning. So in role structure and functioning, I'll be talking about multiplicity and complementarity of roles. Multiplicity, the term multiplicity itself is self-understood. That is, every person has multiple roles within a family. That of a daughter, wife, mother, son, husband, brother. So one person can be performing multiple roles within a family. Complementarity exists when the reciprocal role of role partner is carried out automatically without difficulty and in the expected way. So to explain in simple language, complementarity means when, for example, if the husband is taking care of the shopping, the monthly shopping list, the wife takes care of all the bills, paying the bills. So in that way, if the roles are divided equally without one person having to carry out multiple tasks and experiencing role strain as a result, then we say that complementarity exists in that family. Next, we talk about role expectation and performance. Role expectation refers to a concept held about a behavior likely to be exhibited by a person in a given situation. So role expectation is what is expected out of a particular family member. So if I am somebody's wife or daughter, what is expected out of me as a wife? What is expected out of me as a daughter? And role performance goes hand in hand with role expectation. So role performance is basically how well a person performs a role relative to the expectation for the role. So whatever is expected of me as a daughter by my parents, Whether I'm able to fulfill those expectations or not is my role performance. Um, Similarly, that of a wife or that of a sister, whatever is expected of in that particular role from me, whether or not I'm able to fulfill those expectations, will tell how well I'm able to perform that particular role. Next is role conflict, allocation, diffusion, and ambiguity. Role conflict or role strain refers to a felt difficulty in fulfilling role obligations. So when a person is overburdened with performing too many roles, like I spoke about multiplicity of roles, so any given person in a family usually has multiple roles to perform. However, if in addition to the existing roles, they now have to also perform newer roles, it becomes difficult sometimes to fulfill those role obligations. For example, if there is an old couple where the husband is unwell and the wife is having to take care of the husband as well as manage financially, so she has to also run the household and do a job and take care of her husband, it might be possible that she might be experiencing role strain. Diffusion refers to more than one person being allotted the same role. So when there is role diffusion, it leads to confusion as to who is supposed to carry out a particular task within a family. So if the husband pays the electricity bill this month and next month uh, his brother pays the bill, and the month after that his wife pays the bill, so every time if somebody different is doing this task, then there might be a confusion. So at some point, the husband might think that my brother or my wife is going to pay the bill this time, and they will assume that the husband will pay the bill, and nobody ends up actually paying the bill. So when there is role diffusion, it can create confusion and problems within a family. Ambiguity occurs when no place has been made in the social system, no formal recognition given to a role. For example, the role of a stepfather or a stepmother may not be given any formal recognition in the society. So, what does that role involve may be very unclear. Next, we'll move on to prescription and description of role. So role prescription includes behavior which is usually socially prescribed and defined on a normative basis. So these are often things which exist within society. So, for example, a good wife. What is one's definition of a good wife, or what is society's definition of a good wife, a good husband, a good son? A good son or daughter is one who takes care of their parents and does not abandon them when they are old, provides for them financially, spends time with them, respects them, doesn't talk back to them. So these kind of things, where does all this come from? It comes from society. It comes from society. That is, society prescribes what comprises what kind of a person would be called a good father, good husband, good son, good mother or daughter. So this is what is called role prescription. Role description includes behavior in which persons represent events, processes, and phenomena without evaluative or affective accompaniments. So role description is something very subjective. For example, what one particular husband expects from his wife may be different from what another person expects from his wife. The two people may not have the same expectations from their wives. So this is what description of role means. Then we come to explicit and implicit roles. Explicit roles are those which are open to observation. They are conscious, and both participants of the transacting system are aware of them. So explicit roles are clearly observable, and you're conscious that you're performing those roles. For example, if you are the one who makes breakfast for your family every day. You know that is a role that you have to perform every day. It has been explicitly told to you that you are the one who has to do this. Implicit roles are those which the person is not aware of and are usually unconscious. So implicit roles are those which nobody will come and point out that you are supposed to do this or supposed to do that, but you know that these roles are part of your responsibility to your family, and these roles are part of what you have to carry out in your family. Role accountability refers to the process of holding members accountable for the functions that have been allocated to them. So, role accountability means that if you don't, if you fulfill that particular role, you are probably appreciated for it, and you know that it is my job to fulfill this role. If you are unable to fulfill that role, and you should take accountability for the fact that you have been unable to fulfill that particular role. So role accountability means holding oneself responsible for that particular role. Then we come to instrumental and expressive roles. Instrumental role is played by the one in charge of decisions. So usually whoever takes decisions or takes care of discipline and control within a family is said to be playing the instrumental role. Like, for example, usually fathers are considered to be head of the family, or whoever is the leader within the household would be playing the instrumental role. The expressive role refers to the role of the mediator or the person who smooths over disputes and resolves hostilities in the family. So whenever there is any kind of conflict or dispute in the family, which person usually steps forward and is the one to diffuse these fights and resolve these fights? That particular person is usually someone who is very warm, compassionate, and brings the family together when there is any kind of conflict. Next, we come to communication. So communication is very, very important in family therapy. And in terms of assessment, a lot of times we see that issues between couples or issues between parent-child, subsystem, or within the entire family is because of problems in this particular domain, that is communication. So first we'll talk about channels of communication. So channels of communication basically means who speaks to whom in the family. So we try to understand whether everyone is interacting with each other within the family. So if one particular family member is not talking to some family members or any other family member, then the particular channels of communication might become blocked. If that happens, then it leads to everybody's needs not getting fulfilled. Problems will not be solved adequately, and everybody's goals within the family may not be met. This will lead to dissatisfaction within the family, and that can lead to further problems eventually. So channels of communication normally exist between and among all family members. So usually in a healthy family, you would see that everyone interacts with everyone in the family. Noise level and equality of participation. Noise level is basically the amount and frequency of interruptions of each other by family members during a therapy session. So when family therapy is going on, the therapist usually sees the whole family together. So usually at the outset of the session, we tell them that you would be given turns and you have to speak one by one, and you should not interrupt each other. However, sometimes what happens is they don't listen to each other and they start interrupting and talking above each other. So this leads to a high noise level, and you will not be able to understand as a therapist who is saying what, because everybody is interrupting each other. When noise level is low, it means that this kind of chaos is not happening and everyone is speaking only when their turn comes and listening to each other. Equality of participation. This means whether everyone is getting an equal, whether everybody is getting a fair chance, an equal chance to talk and express themselves in the session. So again, what can sometimes happen is if one person is very outspoken, they might end up talking too much, and other people who are not willing to share, or maybe who is not getting enough space to share, will end up talking less in the session. So as a therapist, it is important to ensure that everybody gets equal time and space in the session to express themselves, and everybody gets a turn to say what they want. Next, we come to direct and indirect communication. So direct communication is basically when the message is directly conveyed to the other person. So if I want to talk to somebody, I'm directly telling that person verbally, or maybe writing to them, but the communication does not involve any third person or any other channel. Indirect communication is when the communication is not clear. So indirect communication can be when you want to say something, but you're saying something else instead. So that can be one example. And another example could be when the communication is happening through a third party or third person. So the communication is not happening directly between two people. So this is indirect communication. Then when we talk about verbal communication, verbal is when you are verbally communicating with another person. Non-verbal communication would usually include body language, gestures, expressions. So this is what is non-verbal communication. Then we come to ambiguous communication. Within ambiguous, there are two types of communication. The first is paradoxical communication. In paradoxical communication, it usually refers to a contradiction that follows correct deduction from consistent premises. For example, I will visit you unexpectedly this evening. Now, what is the problem with this statement? So we are saying, somebody is saying, I will visit you unexpectedly this evening. So the fact that you have said that you will visit somebody this evening means that the person would expect you. So the word unexpectedly is a paradox in this sentence. Another example of paradoxical communication is sometimes it may not be evident that paradoxical communication is happening. Like if a couple is fighting or having differences with each other and the wife is upset with the husband might ask the wife, what happened? Is anything wrong? Are you upset? And she says no. But a lot of times we see that when these kind of conflicts happen, the wife is actually upset, but she is saying no, although she doesn't mean it. So if this kind of unclear communication happens, the other person, the spouse, will not understand that the wife is upset. So the communication should always be direct and clear. We should refrain from using confusing statements. Another example would be if a child has an exam tomorrow and the mother says, why don't you watch TV for some more time? You will get very good marks tomorrow, no need to study. So here, obviously, the mother doesn't mean that he should watch more TV and should not study. She's saying that because she's angry. But it is paradoxical because what she actually means is that he should not watch TV, but she's telling him watch as much TV or watch more TV, don't study. So this is one example of paradoxical communication. Then we come to switchboard communication. Switchboard communication occurs when communication is through third parties, like I mentioned, that it is a form of indirect communication. So if two people are fighting with each other, so if a brother and sister are fighting with each other and are avoiding each other, not talking to each other. So every time the brother needs something from the sister, he tells the mother to pass on the message. So no direct communication is happening between them. This is an example of switchboard communication when the communication is happening through a third person, or when a couple is fighting, they're communicating through the child. Whenever the wife needs to say something to the husband, she asks the child that tell your father, I'll not be eating at home today. Or the father says, tell your mother, I'll not be coming home today. So this is an example of switchboard communication. Then we will be talking about affective status. So affective status basically means the capacity of the family members to respond to stimuli of an emotional nature with feelings which are appropriate in both quality and intensity. So healthy families usually share both welfare feelings, which include love, tenderness, happiness, and joy, as well as emergency feelings, which include fear, anger, sadness, disappointment, depression, and other related emotions. However, if communication is very less in a family or limited in a family, we see that they may not necessarily communicate welfare feelings, and they communicate only when it is an emergency. That is, when emergency feelings arise, or only then they reach out to each other and talk to each other. So this can also help us in understanding how close family members are to each other by understanding how much sharing of emotions happens within and between family members. After this, we'll be talking about reinforcement. So I think most of us are familiar with this term. I think all of you must be familiar with the term reinforcement. So reinforcement basically refers to processes adopted by family members to increase the possibility of occurrence of desirable behaviors by rewarding such behaviors. So we use behavioral interventions. Within behavioral interventions, reinforcement is one of the key things that is used in family therapy. So, for example, if there is conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder, any kind of behavioral problems in children, reinforcement can be used to optimize positive behaviors and desirable behaviors, and also to minimize undesirable behaviors by not reinforcing such behaviors. Another example would be a lot of times between partners, it is seen that a particular spouse feels taken for granted, or they feel like they are not valued enough. So in such cases, also reinforcement in the form of appreciation towards each other can be helpful. After this, we come to cohesiveness. This is somewhat connected to the concept of boundaries. So as you can see on the screen, this is a continuum. In this continuum, the first part is enmeshed. So when we call a family enmeshed, when there is too much of dependency between family members, they are overly dependent on each other. There is very less independence. They consult each other before taking any decision. They are not able to function without the family members, not stay away from each other for long. So this kind of a family usually gives very little space to each other. They are constantly invading each other's personal space. So in that sense, in an enmeshed family, there is no sense of privacy or space. So this is an unhealthy kind of cohesiveness. Then after enmeshed, we talk about healthy connectedness. So healthy connectedness is when there is a healthy degree of connectedness, but there is also some degree of independence in the family members. So they also take time out to do activities independently or have a sense of freedom or space, and know that some things need to be done. They need to also have a life outside of the family. So everything should not be centered around the family. There should be other things, which like maybe having friends, having going out with friends, doing things that don't necessarily involve the family all the time. So healthy connectedness is when there is a high degree of connectedness, but also a healthy degree of um, independence within the family members. Then we come to healthy separatedness. In this kind of a family, it is typically seen that they tend to like more independence than spending time together. But at the same time, they ensure that they spend adequate time with family members. At the same time, making sure that they have a higher degree of independence than dependence. Then the last is disengaged, in which we see that there is a very high degree of independence. That is, everybody in the family is very individualistic and nobody knows what is going on in each other's lives. So there will be absence of family rituals in disengaged families. So they may not be having meals together, going for trips together, doing things as a family together. So in disengaged families, you will find all of these things missing. But presence of family rituals, which involve them spending time as a family together, will be seen in healthy separated and healthy connected families. And family rituals will be very, very high in enmeshed families. So whenever we come across an enmeshed family, in therapy, we try to bring them to healthy connectedness. So we try to reduce the degree of dependence and bring about some independence, which leads to healthy connectedness. Similarly, in terms of addressing a disengaged family, what we do is we try to reduce the independence and lead to and prescribe some family rituals to ensure that the family is also spending time together, and they also get to they also understand and know each other as family members, and they are not completely in the dark about what is going on in each other's lives. So this is what is cohesiveness. um, I would also like to show you this model called the family circumplex model. I'll not be covering this model in detail. This model has been given by David Olson, in which the 4 dimensions that I spoke about, enmeshment, disengagement, that is explained in greater detail in terms of flexibility, in terms of structure, in terms of rigidity, in terms of chaotic, how chaotic a family is or isn't. So these domains help us in understanding how connected or disconnected a family is. So like you can see, this is balanced, this is mid-range, and this is extreme. So the extreme ones are not healthy, and the balanced ones are what one should aspire to be like. So these are possibly the healthy dimensions. So I'll also be sharing in my references for further reading materials about this particular model. So if you want to understand the concept of cohesiveness in greater detail, this family circumplex model explains it very well. Then lastly, we'll be talking about adaptive patterns. So within any family, just like in individual therapy, we look at how good an individual is in terms of their ability to solve problems, cope with stress. We also look at, as a family, that is jointly, how are they at solving problems? If any problem requires a novel solution, can they come together and bring about a effective solution to a problem? And in terms of coping with stress, so one example would be if there is a shift in geographical location. So if, for example, like we see in people working in the army, they get posted to different places. So if the whole family has to suddenly shift to a new place, that would be stressful for them. So how the family has coped with this, or if somebody has lost a job in the family, how has the family coped with it? or if there has been a natural disaster. So any kind of stressful or unpleasant situation, when it occurs, how does the family deal with that? How resilient are they in being able to cope with that stress is what we try to understand. Then we talk about the social support system. So when we talk about social support, we look at three levels. The first is the primary support, which is the immediate family, how supportive the immediate family is. So all the family members have their sense of togetherness, unity, how supportive they are of each other is what will help us determine the primary support. Secondary support includes extended relatives, friends, and neighbors. So again, in addition to the immediate family, if we look at the relatives, friends, and neighbors, how much of a support is the family getting from them? Then we look at tertiary level of support, which refers to hospitals, any government agencies, NGOs, and religious institutions. So how much of a support is the family getting from this tertiary level care? So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. These are some resources which I want to share for further reading. If you want to understand the concept of family therapy in greater detail, I have only covered assessment, but there are a lot many things that you can read about if you're interested in the field of family therapy. These are some textbooks and readings that would help you understand this approach in greater detail. Thank you.